I've got a reflection on the
So
window.
the little jaunt we did in Guernsey was just after we left England, and leaving the port of Poole, we spotted this what looks like a castle on a neighbouring island. And so I looked it up because I'd never been to this part of England before, and it turns out it's Brownsea Island, and this is where the whole Girl Guides, Brownies and Boy Scout story started, because this is where Baden-Powell first had an experimental camp for boys. That was right at the start of last century. The weather was exceptional throughout this entire little mini trip, and considering the price we paid for it, ferry, hotel, we expected nothing less. So our trip to Guernsey last August was organised around two things that we wanted to see. One was, and that was the main reason, it was to look for our ancestors on my mother's side. My mother's grandmother was called Gallienne, which does not sound like a very English name. We were going to go and go in search of her. And the second thing was I organised everything so that we would be there for a full day and a Friday. So a weekday, because we wanted to go and see the big Clematis Centre over there. Because 2 or 3 years ago, I'd seen on YouTube a program with Monty Don called Real Gardeners, and he was visiting someone in Guernsey. She wanted a clematis, and the Clematis Centre is just around the corner from her house. And so I assumed we could visit it. No such luck. Turns out it's not open to the public, but it wasn't very obvious on their website. Anyway, so we went there for nothing, so I have no footage either because we didn't get to see any flowers. Bummer. Anyway, after spending the first night in a very nice little hotel called St. George, and they had a lovely idea for breakfast. They just put breakfast baskets in front of your room around 7 o'clock, which is great. The croissants were even warm. Amazing. And after that, I went to look for a parking disc, because you need special parking discs for Guernsey. You can't use the one from home. I didn't even know you need a parking disc. It was time for lunch already. So we drove north and we had a very nice lunch, a long one. Lots of seafood involved. My mum wanted seafood, obviously, in Guernsey. And so we ate at this place, which is a restaurant right up north, Vale area. And it was kind of hidden away, but there were plenty of people there. So it's quite well known, I think. The food was absolutely delicious. Here's a small look at the menu. And the weather was perfect. And while we were there, we called the archives to find out where we should go to find out more about our ancestors. And it turns out we were at exactly the wrong end of the island. So after a quite long lunch and a little walk around a rocky, very nice little harbour, we set off down south. Because the guy from the archives, a very pleasant young man, said that the name Gallienne came from Torteval, which is right down in the south of the island. And apparently that was the French-speaking part, as you can guess by the name. It doesn't sound English either, Torteval. We assumed that they came from France originally, and it's very likely that they came either from Normandy or from Brittany, which is a real laugh because I never thought we had anything to do with Normandy apart from the house, the manor that my parents bought back in the 80s, because my father was from the south of France and my mother is very English. So it's quite it's quite funny to find out that we are in fact parts Norman or Britain or whatever. Now, the trip down to the south is quite hair-raising because I was driving a German car on the left, which I'm not used to. I mean, I drive, whenever we're in England, I do the driving, but still, on either side of what is a main road in Guernsey, but you can only describe it as a fairly small road, there is a stone wall, so you have to be very careful. And once we reached the south, I was really surprised at how different it looks from the north. The north looks more industrial and basically more built up, and the south was really quite bare. There were lovely beaches there, which we did not have time to enjoy. I was really on the lookout for any trace of Gallienne, and we found plenty of Gallienne everywhere in the graveyards, in lists inside the one church which I was looking for and we found. And there's a place called Rue Gallienne. Gallienne are all over the place. Good sign. And here it is, the church of Saint Philip, or Saint Philippe of Torteval. So it has the highest steeple of the island and also the oldest bell. And it was built 1820 or something, around that date. And in fact, many of the gravestones seem to date from just after the church was built. And there aren't many gravestones there. They all look pretty old, and it's a very nicely kept little graveyard. A couple were very sad. One with the same Christian name as my daughter, and she died at age one day. The conditions must have been pretty harsh back then. I would very much like to know why the Galliens arrived in Guernsey and when and where they came from, but especially why. Because if they really did come from Normandy, which is very, very agricultural and lush, then why did they go to Guernsey? There's usually a reason why people migrate from one place to another, and I'd really like to find out the reason for this one. So after that one full day in Guernsey, which was on one hand rather disappointing from the clematis business, and on the other hand quite moving, in the graveyard, we headed back to the hotel, but first we went to St. Peter Port, back to the capital of Guernsey, just to try and grab a bite to eat and sample some more of the local cider. And it's really quite, it's not just built up, it's on a hill, so it's quite steep at times. There are lots of one-way streets, then you have to get the blasted disc out again and again. All sorts of strange parking slots for different time zones. It's quite complex if you're not used to it. And yes, and just a quick message to the very charming lady who actually pushed down her window and told me to learn to drive just because I was hesitating somewhat, just for a few seconds, at a crossroads. We weren't all born in Guernsey, you know. If we're not born there, then you're not likely to know necessarily where you are at all times. So as a tourist, we are allowed to hesitate. Miss, thank you. Rant over. And apart from that woman and a couple of others who honked, everyone else was charming. Love Guernsey. Funny little boat.